Hello everyone, this is the Tax Terminator Javier Correa, and today I want to talk about two cities that are very interesting, two cities that often come up in our discussions with clients, Panama City and Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I'm going to give you my opinion on both as somebody who has spent time in both of these cities to help you determine which one might be the right choice for you, or if maybe a combination of both might be the right choice for you. So stay tuned. Hello everyone, Tax Terminator here, and in many cases our clients are discussing going to either Latin America or Southeast Asia, and I think that the champions of these regions respectively have to be Panama City and Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I think that even if we have people going to Thailand, people going to Hong Kong, people going to Costa Rica or Montevideo and Uruguay or the DR, by far, the majority of our clients want to talk about Panama and they want to talk about Malaysia. These are the two countries that often come up in discussions when we're talking about Nomad Capitalist plans and international multi-jurisdictional diversification. So as somebody who has been both to Panama City and Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, I'm going to give you my take on both of these cities. I'm going to share my opinions with you and help you potentially and guide you potentially to decide whether one is better for you or the other is better for you, or maybe a combination of both is better for you. We'll see. I'm going to compare elements of lifestyle, tax, and immigration to make sure this is as complete as possible. So number one, let's start a bit with a lifestyle perspective. I do think that depending on what you're looking for, the experience in Panama City and Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia will be very different. So number one, in the case of Panama City, you find a very Americanized city, like the Miami of Latin America. I've mentioned it on many occasions and in many of my videos. I think that if you're looking for that Western lifestyle, if you want that Florida, US style living, that American way of life, but you're looking for better tax opportunities, more business friendliness in many cases, then Panama should definitely be on your radar. They use the US dollar, barbecues, American brands are everywhere. So definitely a very soft landing for people who want to stay very Western, which is ultimately why, that contributed in a very large aspect as to why I personally chose Panama. Whereas in Malaysia, you're further afield. In Malaysia, you do have your American brands, you do have your great malls. So Panama has great malls, KL has great malls too. But in Malaysia, TGI Fridays, Arby's, all of these, they're not the main thing. They're not the main thing that you go there to look for. They are, things that you can find if you look hard enough for them. But mainly you're going to immerse yourself in obviously more of an Asian culture. So the cuisine, the customs, the religion, all of that will reflect upon your way of life there. Malaysia is a Muslim country, and it is a country that has a lot of influence from religions in the Asia Pacific region, and you really see that impact in the culture. Whereas obviously Panama is a Judeo-Christian nation in its vast majority. So again, more closer to the West. I would also say that Malaysia or Kuala Lumpur is a place where you could potentially find a degree of immigration friendliness. I do think, we've talked about Malaysia, My Second Home, the MM2H program on different occasions. That I think is the program through which most people get residence in Malaysia. And there's a bank deposit component to it. There's a property component to it. And ultimately, it is very interesting to take a look at. But I do think that Panama offers more flexibility when it comes to ways to emigrate there. So Panama will give you options if you buy property, if you put money in the bank, if you start a business, if you're a digital nomad, if you are a top-level professional. So Panama is more similar to the UAE in that regard, in that you have just a ton of options to choose from when it comes to immigration. Whereas Malaysia, your real strong option is the MM2H. There are a handful of other programs, but really that's the big one. I will also say that if you're looking for citizenship, Panama is here the clear winner. Panama will naturalize you as a citizen. The timeline can vary depending on the type of residence permit you've gotten in Panama, but ultimately it is possible to become a Panamanian citizenship and to be assimilated into Panamanian culture and the Panamanian community. I have heard many people tell me, well, Javier, but you're exaggerating, because I know many people that have lived in Panama for many years and they haven't been able to get that passport. And the reason mainly is because you do require the signature of the president, and the former president, not the one currently in office, but the previous one, decided not to naturalize anyone. And so that generated a huge backlog. But my understanding, based on the research we've conducted, is that this current president is actually more keen on naturalizing more residents of Panama. So I do think we'll see an increased rate of naturalization in the coming years. But ultimately in Panama, you have a path to citizenship. Whereas in Malaysia, I'm not going to say it's non-existent, but the chances of you getting Malaysian citizenship are essentially slim to none. Based on banking, depending on what your preferences are, I do think that if you're really focused on having an Asia angle for banking and you want to bank in places like Hong Kong or Singapore, I do think living in Malaysia is going to give you a huge advantage. So if you live in Kuala Lumpur, you have a lot of the Singaporean banks that have branches in KL, and that allows you to easily bank across the border. So Singapore is right next door. And if you have a strong Asia angle in your business, and on top of that, you live in KL, then again, accessing Singapore as a great banking jurisdiction becomes much easier. And if that's something that is a priority for you, then definitely living in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia can give you a great advantage. Whereas in Panama, you will have a great banking scene locally. And Panama is, along with Miami and Uruguay, a major banking hub in the Latin American region. My experience would suggest that Swiss banks feel very comfortable working with Panamanian tax residents in general. So I would say, again, it comes down to West versus East. If you feel very comfortable with Western banks, Western institutions, etc., I think Panama is a safer bet. If you really want to migrate more to the East and you want your wealth to be more concentrated in places like Singapore, then definitely Malaysia comes in as a more strategic place. In terms of overall tax friendliness, I do think that Panama does offer a more competitive tax system than Malaysia. So Panama has a full-on territorial tax system, and if you live in Panama City, then you'll be able to take full advantage of it. What I love about the Panamanian tax system is that obviously, the obvious elements are there. Foreign dividends are not taxed. Foreign source interest isn't taxed. Foreign source royalty income is not taxed. Capital gains derived from foreign assets is not taxed, and that is great. But at the same time, it is possible to run certain businesses from Panamanian soil and still operate from a tax-neutral perspective, which is, for example, if you're trading international goods and services and you're buying goods and services in country A and selling them to country B, and those services don't involve anything Panamanian in any way, and the goods that you're buying and selling never enter Panama, if they're physical goods, then you're still operating tax-free. Also, if you're running an international business from a Panamanian office and you are essentially providing services or directing services that are consumed and taken advantage of by foreign clients outside of Panama, then you can also operate tax-free. Whereas in Malaysia, you do have a system that can be favorable, but it does involve you not conducting that business actively from Malaysia. So you do have Labuan. That is an interesting alternative. You could set up a company there, and it's kind of like a sort of free zone. So there are some opportunities there, but that's not KL. So you are limited in terms of where you can operate your business. Whereas in Panama, there's largely more freedom from a business perspective to take advantage of great tax situations. So in KL, I think you will find that you can have an advantageous tax setup provided that you live in KL, but you own businesses that are genuinely managed and operated outside of Malaysia. So if you're the kind of person that has already an international team in place and you're just looking for a tax-friendly place to live that is affordable, then definitely Malaysia could be very interesting. And all you do is remit the income that you essentially need to live on. Malaysia, up until the end of 2026, has a system that allows you to essentially remit certain income tax-free, and only certain income is actually taxable upon remittance. After 2026 and from 2027 onward, the system will be more similar to that of Thailand, in which case you will essentially be subject to tax on any foreign income that is remitted to Malaysia. In the case of Panama, you don't have to worry about remittance. So I guess, again, that speaks to how Panama is more flexible from a tax perspective than Malaysia, and therefore Panama City is more flexible in that regard than KL. I would also say that depending on your travel preferences, you can either choose one or the other. Obviously, if you're somebody who likes to travel to Europe and the US and Canada frequently, Panama is a much more strategic base. If, however, Asia is your region and you want to spend time in places like Vietnam and the Philippines and Hong Kong and Singapore and Thailand, then definitely having a base in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia will be more advantageous.